some dessert coming out for you. So figure we probably better get started. I don't want to keep you here all night. I've only got about 3 hours worth of pictures, so hold tight and we'll get moving. No. This last trip we took was kind of a shorter run. We were only there for about 6 months because we wanted to come back for one last Washington summer, and looks like it's about done. So we're going to go up and see Greg tomorrow morning. We leave at 3 in the morning, and we'll go visit him up in Canada, and we'll be back next week, and that's kind of our last week here. We'll go up north to either my parents or Annalisa's parents on the 14th, and then we fly out on the 17th out of Seattle back to the Philippines, and we are so excited. We've got some great new plans coming up, and I'll kind of go over that in a little bit. Give you a rundown on what happened last year. If this will work for me, if I press the right button. The first thing that happened is Theresa and Sheila showed up, and we got to party with them for a while. It was a lot of fun. They did a women's conference, and this is just a picture of us down in F.R.E.E. We go down. That's the little church that we've been working with. There's a thing on your table there. I'll talk a little bit about it, but you feel free to take one of those home. You don't have to read it now, but it's just Pastor Tony, before we left, he said, you know what, I want to kind of document what's gone on here. And so he wrote all this out. He had Annalisa edit it because his grammar is not that great. But so yeah, take that home with you or whatever. You can take a look at it. Then we took off with our friends George and Joe, and they're from the UK, and they have moved to southern Mindanao this last year. And with the contacts that we've had over the years in Mindanao, they've hooked up with different missionaries and different people and are able to go into some of these places that have never had the gospel. And so we've gone with them on several trips into remote villages. This year we went into a fishing village, so we took a boat down to the southern tip. You can't really see it, but remember I told you in my little advertisement that I saved Annalisa from a wild boar. Well, that's the wild boar. We stopped in at, right before we left to head to this village, we stopped in at this guy's father's place, and he said, oh, I'll get you a pig for dinner. We're like, what? So he goes out there, his boys go out there and hog tie this thing. It's squealing the whole way. And take it down to the boat. We get in this little tiny boat, and they throw the pig in the bottom of it, and he's down there squirming and kicking the whole way. We get about halfway. We're out in the ocean in this tiny little boat, and we get about halfway there, and the thing starts kicking its feet loose. And so I held it there with my feet. That's how I saved Annalisa from the wild boar. But it was just a beautiful place. There's Jason packing the rice. Just a little fishing village. There wasn't, probably 100 people there maybe. And we did some exploring. There's a couple more villages up in the mountains. There's one over the top of the hill. There's a little guy just hanging out on the beach. There's life in the Philippines for you. There's our dinner. We preached the gospel that night. Got all the village there, or most of them, and it was just amazing. I would say pretty much all of them received Jesus that night. They're kind of in these further outreach areas. They're what they call animists. They just kind of believe everything's alive and everything's whatever. They've usually have a witch doctor or somebody with them, and but I was able to preach the gospel. They received Jesus, and as we prayed for them, just some amazing miracles. There was a lady in the back who came up who was half paralyzed from a stroke and had a cane and just kind of wobbling, and by the end of the night she was jumping and dancing and just so excited about what God had done for her. And so excited she came to our little hut the next morning and brought her granddaughter. That's her right there, no cane, and just just excited to be there. she brought her granddaughter because she said she needs to hear the gospel and she needs to be healed. And so we shared the gospel with her, got her born again, and prayed for her for healing. And then she said, well, I've got another friend, too, who made it to the meeting last night, but she's in so much pain. She hadn't been out of bed in years, and she was in so much pain that she had to go back. And so we went and prayed for her. And as we were praying for her, she was just sitting there. We got her out of bed, and she's kind of sitting there, and we asked her, do you want to get up and maybe walk around and see how, make sure, see how this is going, and, we'll keep praying. And so we get up, and we're kind of walking down the beach, and my buddy George there, he said he was just about to ask her if she wanted to kind of pick up the pace or move a little bit more, and she just took off running, just bolted down the beach. She was so excited. God just instantly healed her. And as we left, that's her right there. She was running down the beach, jumping and waving and hollering, and she was really excited. And then a bunch of rowdy kids from here came, and we had a great time with them. We did healing festivals and just an amazing time. Saw incredible miracles. I'm sure you guys got the rundown on a lot of that. It was just a lot of fun. We did the northern provinces, and we went places that that we hadn't been before. We got to hang out in Subic Bay, and that was pretty cool. Really nice city, and there's Jason. Did a lot of children's ministry. Jason, come on up here, buddy. Don't eat that. Give it to somebody. Jason this year really kind of took over. Well, kind of last year, and then coming into this year, he's really taken over a pretty significant role in what we're doing. Because what we'll do is we'll go into an area, and generally we'll set up early, and we'll just gather. It's not uncommon to get a couple hundred kids just hanging out with us. And so Annalisa was kind of doing, working with the kids, do a little mini crusade and pray for the sick. And pretty soon Jason just decided he could do that, so he just started taking it over. I think it was the first night with the youth, and you and Ellie were running around. Tell us about what happened there.
Well, we were just playing with the kids, and then there's 25 kids or something like that. And so I thought, we were just playing, and so I thought, well, why don't we just share the gospel with them? So I ran across the street and asked my mom and dad, or my dad, and I said, hey, we got some kids here, and so I wonder if we should, share the gospel with them. So he said, yeah, if you want to. And so I went over there, and me and Ellie kind of did it back and forth, shared the gospel, and about 25, or all of them, raised their hand to, come to Jesus over there. So it's pretty cool.
And I think it was in F.R.E.E. He had an opportunity to pray for some kids too. And what happened there?
Well, so after the gospel was told, to the kids, then we usually pray for them. And so I went up there to pray, and I thought I was going to be helping the youth. I thought they were going to come up, and I was going to help them. But I went up there, me and Ellie went up there, and then nobody else came up there. So in my head, I was saying, I've never done this before by myself. Okay, I can do this. So I prayed for a kid who had a toothache, and I went along, so I prayed for him, and then I moved on. So I was probably 2 kids away from him, and so, but my mom comes up, and she asked Pastor Tony, the pastor there, if he was okay, or if his toothache was gone. And when she asked him that, Pastor Tony said that he was, and my mom looks at me and, says, Jason. I'm like, yes? And she says, this kid doesn't have his toothache anymore. And I'm like, really? You gotta be kidding me. So that was pretty cool. So yeah.
Thanks, bud. So he's really stepped up in taking care of the kids, and there he is with the guys singing songs, and so we just turn him loose now and just let him go with the kids, because generally when we do these things, we'll set up, we'll bring the kids in, and Jason just plays like crazy anyway, so he's just running around with them. It's utter chaos for a while, and then he'll gather them up, sing a few songs, preach the gospel, pray for the sick, and then for about like $50 we can feed about 200 kids a pretty good meal. And so then we'll feed them all, and then tell them to run home and grab their parents to come back for the evening, and then we'll present the gospel in the evening, usually with a band or something, and then pray for the sick. It's just there was a group from Las Vegas that came right before we left. Jeremy and Nina Porter had moved to Las Vegas a few years ago and hooked up with a church, the International Church of Las Vegas, and they called us up and said, hey, we were wanting to go on a mission trip and wondered if we could come to the Philippines. I said, sure, come on over. So we kind of knew Jeremy a little bit, and the rest of them we hadn't ever met. It was the youth pastor and some leaders and his wife and some kids. And so we just kind of drove to the airport and looked for the tall white people and picked them up and took them home with us. And we had an amazing time. They were kind of new at, he's only been doing the youth pastor thing for about a year and decided he needed to go on a mission trip. And so at first he was just like, okay, well, you guys just we'll just follow you around and see what you do, and then we'll try and pick it up. And that's the first few, it was kind of like that. But after that, they jumped right in, and the Spirit of God's in you, and you kind of get a good idea what to do, and you just go. And so what was really neat, too, is, there's Annalisa. She got to share her testimony, and we had to make the kids leave the room because it's kind of, it's rough. But people just received, and we got to pray for people there. There's Jeremy. And there's Jason with the kids again, and there's just a gratuitous little girl shot. Adorable. This is Jeremy and Sam, their youth pastor. What was really interesting is we had been working with the local school right next door to the church, Pastor Paul's church. And to begin with, when we first moved there, we were able to, I was teaching classes in the high school there twice a week on values. And so it was wide open. We just go in there and started out preaching the gospel, but just doing, spiritual life and talking about, serving God. And it was just like a big youth class every, twice a week and all week long. And we're talking, they double shift this school, and there's like 90 kids in a class. And so we did that for a while, and then they changed principals, got a new principal in there who didn't really like what was going on. And so Pastor Tony and I got sent to the principal's office one day, and it really felt like 8th grade again, sitting there. Yes, Mrs. And she's telling us, well, I don't really like what you're doing, but since the old principal let you do it, I will let you continue to the end of the year, but it will be no more. Like, oh, okay, well, thank you very much. So over the last few years, the Pastor Paul's church, and we've been putting on events for the high school kids, the Valentine's Day events and Christmas stuff and different things, so they could have things that the school wasn't providing. And just this last year, they were they got their budget cut, and they don't have any counselors. So they talked to Pastor Paul and asked if he could have some people help with some counseling. He said, sure. And he said, you know what? We got a group of Americans coming, and we'll buy you fans for your rooms. You let us come and just kind of talk to the kids. And so we were able to go into every one of those classrooms. We spent 2 days doing it and preaching the gospel, getting people born again, praying for healings, people getting healed. And now they've reinstated the values classes, and Pastor Paul's pastors are doing the counseling for this school. So it was a really really great opportunity. So there they are receiving Jesus. Just an amazing time. And then also another cool thing while they were there, we just got a new mayor. Well, he's not really new. He was mayor for 3 years, which is he served his 3 terms. And so he was out for a term, and it was a horrible mayor that came in for the next term. So she was ousted, and he got reelected. So, and he's really good friends with the people in our church, and so they've allowed us to come back into the prison. So we were able to go. And Jeremy Porter has an amazing testimony. I mean, he spent 11 years in prison, off and on, and with drugs and all kinds of stuff. And so he went in there and shared his testimony, and I mean, yeah, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. I mean, it was amazing. And one of the guys who Robert Noki, our worship leader, has a real heart for the prison ministry, and he was with us. And as he was in there, he looks in there and he sees the man who led him to Jesus sitting in this prison. And he got in there and got to talk with him, and the whole place was just like, oh. It was an amazing time, and it confirmed in him that he needs to continue with what God has called him to do. So it was awesome. F.R.E.E, we got to baptize all the little rugby boys that we had been praying for over the years. Let me back up a little bit. There's a group of kids down there at this church that we would pray for that are glue sniffers. The glue they sniff is called rugby, and so they're just known as the rugby boys. And we'd walk by them, and they're just out of their minds. Their eyes are all red. They're just gone somewhere. And we'd lay hands on them and pray for them. And we started a Bible study for them. And we had about 7 of them show up the first night. It was a Saturday night. And then the next Saturday night we had 20. And the next Saturday night we had 30. The next Saturday night we had over 40 kids there. And these kids we've continued to work with and have been an integral part of Pastor Tony's church now. It's so much so that he does a Sunday morning service, and then he does a twice-a-month youth service because he can't fit the kids and the adults in the church. And those kids, I think it was last year, was amazing. They put together this, we did a youth outreach, and we used those kids, and we did an outreach for that area. And so they did this, there's like 40 of them. They do this hands ministry thing where it's black lights and white gloves, and they do it to music. It's an amazing thing to watch. But it was all these kids, and there's 40 of them. And Jason was part of it. And he wasn't one of the rugby boys, but he got to join in with the... And Pastor Tony put this stuff on his Facebook, and one of his pastor friends from the other side of town calls him up and says, "Hey, can you guys come do an outreach at our church too? Youth outreach?" He's like, "Sure." So we loaded all those guys up in the back of a flatbed truck. I drove them clear across town, chanting and hollering all the way. It was crazy. But we went there and were able to do an outreach. So these kids, this year when we first got there, they wanted to be baptized. So we rented a pool and baptized these guys. It was just awesome. And one of the most amazing things that happened this last year with the youth from here that came is we did our one of our last healing festivals. Come on in, guys. Okay. We did our last healing festival with them in F.R.E.E. I think it was our last one. I don't know. But we used a big open basketball court, and that place was packed. There was people hanging in the trees. I would imagine over 1,000 people crammed into this miniature basketball court, probably an area this size. And there were so many people that when we called for people to come up to receive Jesus, they couldn't all get up there. So we just prayed for everybody and prayed for healing for people where they sat. And so there were so many people that we really didn't know. Usually we have testimonies, but we couldn't. It was just too crowded. So the next Sunday, Pastor Tony gets these new families coming to his church saying, "Yeah, we were healed at the meeting the other night, and here's my friend here. They're sick. They need to be healed too." And so they were bringing people to his church, and so he started doing every first Sunday of the month. He would have just a healing service. He said when they came, I just threw my notes out and said, "We're going to talk about healing today, and we're going to pray for the sick." And they did, and people getting healed. It was just amazing. So he invited me, I think, the next Sunday to come, the next Healing Sunday, to come preach and pray for the sick. It was just an awesome. It's a really cool thing, because I've kind of been with Pastor Tony from the beginning, and to see him get to that point of self-reliance and the Spirit of God moving in his church is really exciting to me. So. Yeah, let me run through that. That's actually on that piece of paper in front of you, but I'll run through it really quick because it's a pretty amazing story. When I used to just make trips with Pastor Glenn. We'd go over there once a year for a couple of weeks, and in one of those trips, matter of fact, I don't even think you went on that trip. I think it was just Byron and I, and it was Gary Sales and Greg and Larissa, yeah. And so we stopped into Proxais, and Tony had just kind of been wanted to start a Bible study down there. And so we went down there and just did just an evangelism thing, grabbed a bunch of people and preached the gospel and got people born again. And he started down there with 5 ladies in a Bible study, and kind of grew it from there. Byron, he showed him a piece of land that he was thinking about buying, and Byron went home and sent a check for it so he could buy it and build a little church on it. And it was a little church. It was just, hold about 20 people, probably 10 Americans. And and so he started that way. And then when we started being there full time, I think one of the times Howard showed up, and we were down there looking at the church, and he had about an extra 12 feet off the back of it. And at this time, he was running probably 50 people in this little church. And they were spilling out the back. So we asked him, well, what would it take to add on that extra 12 feet to your church? And he said, oh gosh, probably, he gives us this insurmountable number, which was about $300 US.